Good morning, everyone. This is Luann from Big Hairy Dog. I'm a trainer here. Today's webinar is about version 9 reports. Right, so I'm just going to check here, make sure people can see my screen. Audience view. Yeah, everybody can see my screen, right? So should be seeing an agenda about what we're going to talk about today. This webinar will last approximately an hour. When you're finished, or when we are finished, anybody who's logged in will get an email link back to the recording of this webinar. I had 18 people signed up. It looks like so far I've got 10 of you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start. If anybody drops in a little late, right, this recording will go to them as well. Okay, it's going to be a little difficult with this many people to open up your mics and take questions, but if you, there's a raise your hand button, there's also a chat screen, and if you have a question, if you drop into those, I'll try to pay attention to that, right, and cover those as we go. All right, so let me minimize this, and without further ado, we'll get started. Okay, so the topic today is just to go through what comes with Retail Pro, what comes with Big Hairy Dog, and what tools you might have to change things yourself, right, or otherwise deal with reports in version 9. If some of you came from version 8, right, there was a report writer that was in version 8, and it had some you know, pretty decent capabilities to put together your own report, right? And that came with a lot of reports, and you could use those, copy them, edit them, and so what we attempt to show here is how that works out similarly, and what capabilities you have over and above the capabilities that you had in version 8. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize my agenda here, right? And we're going to get started here. I'm going to back out of my reports executable here and go back to the desktop. Okay, so this is your Windows desktop. Most of you would have a separate executable here, this Retail Pro 9 reports executable, and you would launch it from outside. Some of you might have a button in your Retail Pro itself. Bring mine up. My system was being a little sluggish today. See if it gets to cooperate. So some of you might have a button like this up here, where it has reports, and you can get into reports from Retail Pro, right? And feel free to use either one. Some people like theirs removed. Some people like them embedded or accessible from the menu, right? So either way gets you into the reports executable, and you'll probably be prompted to log in using your Retail Pro login. Okay, we're going to use the sysadmin for now, okay, because I want to be able to see everything that's in there, right, and talk about what things you can and cannot change, okay, as you go through. All right, so if somebody has a question already, hopefully shows computer. Yes. All right, so I have someone who can't hear. So let me open this up here, see if I can. Kim, can you hear me? Kim? Kim, can you hear me? Jim, can you hear me? Okay, it appears like maybe we're not, oh, you can hear fine. So Ian can hear, Ian is on computer audio. All right, so any of you, let me just, I'll write a note, right? So 1 sec, so you might not be able to hear what I'm saying. One sec, please. Notepad. Okay. If you Okay, so anybody who is having trouble hearing me, go ahead and well, you won't be able to hear this message, but I'm going to have them disconnect and connect back in. And like I said, anybody who's in this webinar will get a link back to the full recorded webinar. So don't worry about missing anything. Okay, let me minimize that. Thanks, Ian, for your response. Okay, so this is the reports menu, right? When you first set this up, and so if you have running a V9 system, the things I'm about to show you should already be set up on your reports executable. What we like to show people, because sometimes they get changed, or you might need to change them. And so in the options section over here on the side, right? If we go to workstation preferences, okay, and by the way, this is not actually workstation preferences, it is preferences for the reports for a local group of computers. So if you have a server and 3 workstations attached to the server, what you change in workstation preferences should apply to all of your workstations that are connected to that server. Okay, got another question? Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, so first thing, right, is down here under the printing preferences, right? So over here on the left, printing and printing preferences, this tells us what the default printer is for reports. This can be different than the Windows default printer, right? So you don't want to assume that it's going to pick up the Windows default printer. You want to set this right in here, okay? And then out of the box, this reports executable comes without the ability to print or pick like page 2 out of 6 or just the last page. So you want to make sure that's checked so that you can print just the first page, just the last page, or any bunch in between. Okay, so those are things that should be set it up and leave it that way unless your default printer changes, right? And you need to point it at a different printer. The other thing that's important to note in here is up under General and Appearance. Okay, Display Report Filter. This is highly recommended that you do display the settings that you chose when you filtered the report at the top of the report. The choice is you can also put them at the bottom. Okay, that's up to you. If you use a lot of filters and they make the top of the report messy, or you know, you get halfway down the page before you get actual data, you can put them on the last. Okay, we do not recommend that you use none, because then you don't know if you've used any filters, what those filters are. For instance, if you ran a sales report, right, for month to date, and you didn't have the filters on, you wouldn't know that that was run for month to date. You wouldn't know the date range for that report. So we recommend first page. Do last if you really want to, but none is probably not a good idea. Okay, and those are the only real things that are important in here for you to know. All right, so in the reports executable, everything that you need to run a report is here under reports. Okay, there is a menu structure, and if you came from older versions of Retail Pro, this menu structure will look familiar. We're just going to go through that briefly, right, so you know what's in the different sections. Okay, and I'm going to start with the things that come with Retail Pro as a standard. Okay, in the list view section, okay, these are lists of records, essentially, right, that you just click on them and print, right? So it's a very simple report. Some of these, like department list and employee list, there might be better ways to get that information, but it's just a standard way. Like if, for instance, right, you wanted a list of your vendors with their name and address, then you can get it this way. Okay, and here it is, right? So when you run a report, no matter where it is, right, you have your choice, right, of just, it defaults to viewing on the screen, right? You can then print it, okay? You can export it to these different areas, right? So if you're exporting to PDF, right, you just click on PDF, click OK. It will fire up your Adobe viewer, okay, and show you the report in Adobe Viewer. So if you wanted to email it from here or print it from here or whatever, then save it to your desktop, then you have that capability. Okay, so that's one export. Close the window. Minimize the window. There we go. Okay, the other ways that are common that people export is to Excel. Okay, the one on the top, this Excel has the formatting and everything, right? So it'll take the blue bar and the gray, or yeah, the gray bars, and all the spacing and all of that, right into Excel, right? If you're going to use the data for something, if you're going to resort your columns, if you're going to do anything with the data, you want to use text only to bring it in, because it'll leave the colors and the formatting behind, and all you'll get is your data in hopefully pretty neat columns. Okay, I've had people export this into Word, right? If they wanted to embed this in a document for whatever reason, right, that will work as well, right? But in order to get to this, right, these are all under the Export tab right here. The Save As, right, is saving this report with the data so that you can look at it look at it later, right? So it defaults to saving it as a crystal report, right? That's pretty much the only choice. So what that means is that you can only open it with the crystal reports reader, which is what we're in right now, right? So this is a crystal reports reader, right? That's embedded with Retail Pro, so that it runs their reports, gives you the capabilities of displaying them on the screen, saving them with the data. But if you do the save with data, then you can only open them in crystal reports. Okay, if you save them to PDF, you can open them with any PDFer. Okay, the other two things on here we'll kind of go through in a bit, right? So if we're done, we're going to close this right here. Okay. Okay, and it takes us back to the menu. All right, so lists, pretty simple. Some people use these customer lists, right? If you want a list of the customers and whether or not they have store credits, that's a good place to get it. And so these are pretty simple. These all come with Retail Pro. Okay, the next cut up from there are these journal reports, right? So I'm going to open the plus next to the journal reports. Okay, and I'll display them in here, right? So you'll notice that this pane doesn't automatically open up wide enough, right, for you to see the whole full title of the report. But if you click on the header right here of the menu, then you'll see all of them over here. So journals are documents generally, right? So a list of documents, right? So a list of POs, right? Or a list of your receiving vouchers with or without detail, a list of your sales with or without detail, or a few specialized things right here, right? Only show me my reversed receipt journal. So a lot of these are comparable to reports that date back to version 8, right? And these all come with Retail Pro, and it's pretty much easy to tell from the title what you're going to get, right? So PO journal without item detail, you're not going to get items, right? PO journal with item detail, you're going to get items. But basically, it's going to list things PO by PO, okay? Because the PO is the document. All right, and then the summary section. is got lots of reports in it. This is where the meat of the Retail Pro canned reports come out of. And let me just wind that. Okay. And so you can tell pretty much by looking at them, you know, what they have to do, like inventory. These are all on-hand type reports, right? When they say PO, right? These are not journals, these are summaries. So you will get, you might see the PO number, but they're going to be combined together like by DCS, right? Summarized by DCS. Okay, you'll notice as we're looking at this that there's only one what we call data type, right, on each of these. So a report that's a summary can either be show your sales, right? It can show your sales units, cost, price, margin, blah, blah, blah. But it's all sales. That's one data type, sales, right? And you can cut sales up or sort, filter, or whatever by lots of different elements, right? You can have it sorted and summarized by associate, sorted and summarized by department. So there's lots of different ways to look at sales because that's what we're in the business of doing, selling things. So you can tell by the title that this is a sales report, right? And this is the level of detail that you're going to get, right? If it doesn't say item or style in the title, you're not going to get that level of detail. So a department summary, right? If I run this, okay, you're going to see a department, right? So here's your DCSs, right? Quantity sold, extended price, cost, margin percent, right? But there's no item on this, right? You're not down to that item level. So that's what I'm saying when something can be a summary, like this, associate summary by item, right? That can be a summary, and that's going to have item level detail in it because it's in the title. So in general, the titles of the reports give you an indication what level of detail, right, and how the thing is summarized, right? If some of you, if you are not familiar with this sales monthly summary, this is one I like to show people. And let's just do everything here. My database is not that big, so it doesn't take that long to run a report. By the way, this pop-up that I keep whizzing by here, right, generally speaking, right, you're only going to see this pop up if you have maintenance packed the reports, right, or if you've put a new version in, right, and this is just a confirmation that something has changed and it's a little bit different. In general, if you see this pop up, right, you're always going to answer yes. Okay. There are some instances that you know, where potentially where this might say older than the database, but whatever the situation is, you're going to say yes, you know, 99.99% of the time. And if you say no, it's going to keep asking you, right, every time you run the report until you say yes. All right, so just as a quick look at this report is summarized by month, right? So here's my sales for 2016 by month, my sales for 2017 by month, next, right? My sales month until I stopped. Okay, the other thing that's cool about some of these reports is they've got pretty charts and graphs, right, that come with them. On the custom reports that we do, sometimes we take those off because you know, they're cool, they're pretty, and you know, if you understand what this is telling you, right, they can be very useful. But for the undefined time frame, for this is like life to date, right? If you look at this color orange on April, right, for sales quantity. For the history of my system here, April comprises almost 16% of my sales quantity, okay? But in my total sales dollar amount, it's only 9%, right? So I'm selling a lot of units, right, in this time frame, right, at lower price points, right? And that's what that means, right? You look at October here, right? My units are almost 12%, but my dollars are 36.9, right? So I was selling some relatively more expensive merchandise during that time frame. So these things can tell you something really at a glance, right? And if they're useful, then use them. If they're not useful and you're customizing a report, you could feel free to take them off. And then we're going to go through that a little bit later. All right, so sales, right? Summaries just have sales on them. Inventory, this is just on hand. Adjustments, this is just your adjustment memos, right? Checking in and out, relatively straightforward, right? Receiving, right? That's what you've received, right? And it says past 12 months, you're going to get one lump sum for the past 12 months, right? One summary. All right, so those are the first three sections that come with Retail Pro, right? List, a summary, journals, and then the last section is much more interesting because in merchandise reports, we can do more than one time frame, right? So here's where I can get your this year, last year type reports. And I can also have reports on here that have on hand and on order and sales for a couple of time frames. So there are, a lot more uses for these. They're a little more complicated, a little more sophisticated, and those are your merchandise reports. Okay. What we're going to focus on, right, is not necessarily what Retail Pro gives you out of the box, but what Big Hairy Dog does after that, right? So if you have a directory on your system that's named custom, chances are it looks something like this. It's got a lot of reports in it that say BHD at the front, right? And so these are reports that are potentially, some of them are versions of reports that existed in Retail Pro, but somebody wanted them tweaked, right, for whatever reason. And I'm going to show you an example of that and show you how that's done. It's part of what we do today. But if you do not have this on your system with all of these, then send us an email or whatever, and ask service set up an appointment to get the custom reports installed for you. Okay, it doesn't take that long, and the custom reports are reports that we make available for Big Hairy Dog customers as a courtesy, right? So to add to the functionality that Retail Pro has out of the box reporting wise. There's a lot of really useful reports in here, and some of them are summary type reports, like you'll see these sales report DCS by store. That's only going to have sales, right? If you'll see something like an associate performance report, right? So I show people this because this is not a simple report. It's at the other end of the spectrum from simplicity's sake. But just to show you what the capabilities are of some of these reports, this one, the associate summary, is a really simple, easy to understand file that shows on one line, right, how your associates are performing. We have some that are a little more complicated than this. They have units per transaction on it, average, this one's got average sale, but they have more statistics, right? We have developed some things that are like that. But then you can get up to something like this associate performance report that might not even be able to see very well on this screen. Oh, yeah, okay. One sec here. There we go. Okay, so this is a little hard to explain what we're doing here, but let me blow that up a little bit. It might be easier to see. But we can put a lot of statistics on these reports, right? And some of these statistics are computed inside our Crystal, right? So that's what's cool about Retail Pro letting Crystal be the report viewer, is that you can get a copy of Crystal Reports Writer, right? And you can take an existing report and change it, add to it, enhance it, or whatever, and then run it with your Crystal Reports writer, right? So what we're going to do, right, is go through a real basic task like that, okay, with Crystal Reports, so you can see kind of how that's done. The goal here is to give you just an idea of what's involved if you want to customize your own reports. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get what you need out of stuff that's already been done. So we encourage you after, if you go to this webinar and you have all these custom reports, but you haven't explored them all, explore them first. If you have a specific need that you don't think is being met with the custom report that exists already, shoot your trainer an email, or if you don't know who your trainer is, shoot service an email and ask to set up a conversation with one of us trainers here, so you can tell us what your need is, or if you can articulate your need in an email quickly enough. Hey, do you have a report that does X? Right? We might be able to just return that answer in an email. Okay. If we can't return the answer in an email, then it might take a conversation. All right. So there's a lot of reasonably sophisticated reports on here. We're not going to go through all of them because everybody has different needs. Okay. But what I was going to do here is take a reasonably simple report, right, and show you what it takes if you wanted to change something, right, and what it would, how you would get it into Crystal Reports writer. It's called registering the report. Before we go there, though, I guess, no, we'll do that in a minute. Never mind. Okay, so let me look at my agenda here and see where, yeah, okay, we're going to do changes first. All right, so I'm going to take a simple report, this one here, on hand by item. So this one is a simple report that existed in Retail Pro, but for whatever reason, I wanted to change, add a field, subtract a field, change the way it was sorted, or something like that, right? This is a simple report. If you see this where it says report path right here, right, I know that the name of this report, the name of the file, that's the RPT file, is in the custom directory, right, and it's called !M4_OH_items.rpt. The .rpt means that it's a crystal file. Okay, so when I go to where my Retail Pro, okay, is resident on this disk, it's on the R drive, right? There's a reports directory. Okay, so reports directory right here. Okay, and in the reports directory is a bunch of garbage. Oops, I didn't get the reports directory. So Retail Pro. Okay, wrong place. Okay, reports directory. All right, so reports directory, right? So you can see the directories here that correspond to my tree over here. So here's my tree: audit, custom, journals, list, merchandise, other, summary, right? And then down here, right, there are folders, right, that contain those RPTs, right? So the folder I'm working in is the custom folder, right? And there's a lot of stuff in here. But if I sort this so you can see the M4OH items.rpt, that's the actual Crystal report that I can open up and change. All right, so if you're starting to work with Crystal, you need to know what file you're going to start with. We, even us trainers, never ever start from scratch, right? So we always grab a report that's close to what we want and modify it. Okay, so we never go into Crystal Reports writer, right, and create something from scratch. Now I already got Crystal Reports open down here. I'm going to pop that up. Hang on a second, I got a question. Why does the folder have added or not show up in the reports tree? Okay, so that's a good question, Ian. So the answer to the question, and let me read this for everyone. So in here, okay. So the folders, right, that contain the stock reports are here. When we can create a custom folder, right, and we can create an other folder, okay, but there might be other folders in here. Let's say in here, right? So I'm going to try to demonstrate how to fix that, right? So I've got, you know, this SF folder, right? So why don't I see my SF folder in there? Okay, and the answer to that question, okay, is that you haven't registered a report in that folder. Okay, so what I can do is I can try to take one of my existing reports, okay, and I can try to move it to the SF folder by editing. Okay, this is kind of off the track, but I want Ian to see this, right? So if I highlight a registered report, click the edit, right, and then change this right here, okay, to SF, and save it, and cross my fingers. Sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. Here we go. Report is saved. Okay. All right. So now, yay, SF folder. Okay. So, Ian, I have tried with previous versions of. Hang on a sec. Another question. Okay. I have tried with previous versions of the Retail Pro reports, right, to register directly into a folder that didn't show up, had limited success. So I know this works. Okay, if you take an existing report, get it, change the thing, now you can register into this folder, into the SF folder, and be okay, usually. We do caution people against doing this, because what we have had happen is when you maintenance pack the reports, right, upgrade your version or whatever, it has been known to throw away these extra folders. Okay, so make sure that if you put, if you create extra folders and put reports in them, okay, save a copy of the exported report. This is part of what we do here, is export for in this webinar, right? Teach you how to export the reports. So if you wanted to move them between different systems, you can. But if you register them in this directory, export it, save that export somewhere, because if you lose your folder, then you can just re-import them right back into that folder, and it's less painful. Okay. All right. Anyway, good question. That might have been over some people's heads, but okay. Yeah. All right. So we were going to Crystal, right? So I know what the name of the file is, and the file was this one. Okay, so I already have it opened in Crystal. So this is Crystal. Let's see if I can go back to the main. I can't really go back to the main. So this is Crystal Reports. It's a industry standard tool. You can download a trial version for 30 days. If you want help doing that, let us know. But if you feel like you want to really try this, right, you could download a copy, kick the tires for 30 days. We always tell people when we're training them, if you're going to open this up in Crystal and you're going to work on it, okay, save it as something else. Don't work on your golden copy, right? Because when you're learning this, it can be, you know, a little embarrassing if you accidentally blow a report up that somebody wants to use. Okay. This happens to be the one we were looking at, the $M4 on-hand items. Just make sure here. Let's save as. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be brave and I'm going to edit this in place just because I do this all the time. But what you're looking at here is your workspace, right? And it's also pretty much a way that you can design in here, right? And you can also preview the data, right? So this is an on-hand report. I guess I should run this. I did run this on the screen, didn't I? Yeah, let's go back to up here and put it on the screen so you can see it. Run. Okay. All right, so let's say I have this report and I want to change something about it. This is this field that's unnamed here. This is my description 2, I'm pretty sure. Okay, but let's say I wanted to add UPC to this, right? Or I wanted to take description 1 or 2 off. Most commonly with the core reports that come from Retail Pro, they don't all have description 2. So we have ended up with most of the important ones adding the description 2 onto it. Okay, and this is how we do it. Okay, in Crystal, right? So let's say we're going to take this description 2 off, right? So this detail band right here is showing up on the report, and this is the lowest level of detail that shows up on the report. Okay, all the fields that you see are what you see when you go. I'm going to preview this in here. The other thing that preview or that Crystal can do is read your database, okay, and give you a preview right in the pane. So that can be helpful. All right, so I'll get my preview pane up, right? So this is what we should be looking at over here because we're running it unfiltered. All right, so let's say I want to take this field, right, and I want to put UPC there instead. Okay, so I highlight the field, hit the delete key, and then over in this pane over here on the left, sometimes people dock them on the right, sometimes they're on the left, up to you. Question? So there's a question about where you can find the Crystal report writer, right? If you just Google Crystal report writer, right, that'll take you to SAP, so that's owned by SAP now, and you want the reports writer. Okay, so sometimes they're bundled with other stuff, but all you really need is the Crystal reports writer. You might have to register with SAP in order for them to allow you to download a trial. Okay, but it should be relatively straightforward if you can get onto their website and get a trial of Crystal reports writer. Okay, so we've opened this up, right? Over on the pane, over here on the side, there's several sections, right? The database fields, right? I'm going to hit the plus next to database fields. And this is the procedure that holds all my fields, right? These procedures are SQL packages, right, that are predefined, right? Some of them are Retail Pro predefined. Some of them are ones that we've created standard, okay? And the important thing about that is if I could click the plus here next to the procedure name, here's all the fields I could put on this report. Okay, so all this humongous list here, the ones that have check marks to them, those are already on the report in some way, shape, or form. They might just be used in a formula, okay, but they're on the report somewhere. Okay, if it's not on this list, you can't put it on directly on there unless you devise some kind of formula to get the same information. And we'll look at a couple formulas here, but I'm doing something simple, right? I'm finding something that's on the list, right? And I'm going to drag it over into this spot. Okay, some of them come with built-in titles, some not, right? So I'm using Shift and there. So I'm using like Control, right arrow, left arrow, up arrow to move the thing around. Shift, right arrow, up arrow, left arrow sizes the field. So that's similar if you're familiar with the doc designer. in Retail Pro or the Page Designer. Those tools work very similarly, right? So if you're familiar with those, dealing with Crystal, pretty easy. I think dealing with Crystal is easier than Doc Designer and Page Designer. So if you're frustrated by Doc Designer and Page Designer, don't despair, because I think Crystal is easier. I came from, outside of, Retail Pro. I didn't grow up with Doc Designer and Page Designer, and I took to Crystal pretty easily. Right? They have align tools. So if I highlight this field heading for ALU, hold the Shift key down, right, and highlight this, right, then there's align tools. I don't have my ribbon, so I'll just do this. I'll right-click here, align top, right, similar to what happens in Page Designer, and to a limited extent, the Menu Designer, or the Doc Designer, sorry. Okay, and then you can, select everything in the band, right, and align it, make all the fonts the same type of thing, right? They have this cool thing called a Format Painter, right? So if I highlight this ALU, right-click and go Format Painter, right? See that it changes my cursor to this little funny-looking no thanks sign, and I land it right here. It turns to a paintbrush. And I click that, then it copies my font attributes over on the top of that, which is kind of a neat tool. Anyway, so I've got UPC in here. You see, you can't really tell, but that font is larger than the rest of the detail, so I'm going to format paint that. You can also just deal with formatting the field, and here you have all the options to do that, right? There's the font, right? Right, left, justify, blah, et cetera, right? And so we've added UPC, right? If I save that, right, I can go look at my preview right in here, right, and see if I've left enough room, if I want to change something, before I put my copy back in Retail Pro. Okay, so this is, a very simple change, right? If you could also do the same thing if you wanted to, flip things around, right? If you wanted to have the UPC here and the ALU here, you just drag them, move them around, line them up, right, and you're good, right? So that's a really simple change. And, this is a report, right, that I have edited in place, right? So if I go back to my report viewer here, right, close this sample, if I come back in and I rerun the same report, okay, with the same filters, it's going to know that I changed something, right? So I kept getting this message before on all my Retail Pro standard reports because I'd done a maintenance pack on this and I hadn't run those reports since. Now this is telling me, hey, you changed the report, right? Is this the change you want to be permanent in your database? Yes, it is. Now I've got UPC here instead of my description too. All right, so that's simple, right? I want to show you just a couple more things that are relatively simple about managing a report in Crystal. Okay, for that, we're not going to use this one. We're going to go to department percent total. Where's that? This one right here. We're going to look at this one. Yes, that one's right. Okay, so I'm going to run this real quick. Okay, so we can look at it, right? And then we're going to make a change. Okay, so what this is designed to do, okay, is show me my DCSs, right? Summary for each DCS line. Okay, and currently this one is ranked, right? See where it says quantity here? So within the department, okay, my DCS sales by units are ranked. So this is kind of a bestseller report, but it's a bestseller by department, right? There's a bunch of stuff in here that you can do in Crystal that I just want to introduce you to briefly, right? I'm not going to take a lot of time doing it, but it's it's just to try to show a little bit of the power, right, of Crystal. All right, so we're done with this one. We're going to get rid of that. This is not the one I'm looking at. This is Yeah, this one says sales item summary at the top of it, but this is actually the one that we're looking at. So an important thing to note here is that this one, right, the detail line, right, where the item level information is grayed out. We've hidden it, right? So I've hidden that because I don't want to display the detail line. All I want to do is display a subtotal, right, of the by the DCS, right? So I'm subtotaling this by DCS. You see this where it says group footer. I choose to put my totals in footers. Some people put them in headers. Some people put them in both, right? But you know, you have your choice, right? So I'm showing this group footer, right, as DCS, and then I'm subtotaling it by department, okay, and then subtotaling it by vendor, right? So there's a lot going on in this report. Let me go back here because I didn't notice that it was doing it by vendor. That's because most of my stuff in here, so you can see here's the vendor line right here, James Purse and Nike shoes. So it splits this out by vendor, right? And if I don't like that anymore, I can just take the vendor out, right, and change this report entirely. So maybe that would be a good exercise to do. But you have a lot of control here. Okay, so if we wanted to make this into let's say, take the vendor out, okay, or put, yeah, we just do take the vendor out, I think. Yeah, just make it simple. Okay, so I'm going to save a copy of this, right? So file up here, save as, okay, I'm going to put it in the custom directory, and just so it's going to be easy for me to find, I'm just going to put new on the front of this. Okay, so I'm creating a new RPT file, putting it in the custom directory. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that copy, right, by taking vendor. I'm going to delete this vendor code subtotal, right? So if I delete this group, okay, so now what I'm going to have, right, okay, if I preview it, okay, is just the DCS, right, and the sum to the department. So I lose that that vendor subtotal, and that was my purpose, right? So if you look at this, this is still a bestseller, right, by units, right? So one of the things that we talk about is where does that happen? How do you turn it off if you don't like it? Okay, so up here at the top where you see report, okay, and group sort. Okay, if I go into group sort and I go to the DCS code level, so I'm sorting at the DCS code level currently, right? I'm sorting all, descending, sum of quantity, right? So if I wanted to turn that off, all I do is change that to no sort, and I say okay, right? And so you can see behind me the preview automatically obeyed my wishes, right? And now this is in like DCS order. Okay, and there's no longer a bestseller, you know, component to this report. Okay, but this is a copy, right? And so now if I wanted to make that runnable, right, in my report viewer, this is what you need to do, right? So in the report viewer, back out of this one. Okay, we're going to do what's called register the report, right? This is a little tedious, so I apologize in advance. Okay, but this is a skill that you learn if you're going to be messing with reports, right? So you don't have to take notes now, but in order to run a report with the Crystal Reports viewer, right, you have to do what we call register the report, and this is what you do. So if you highlight any report in the section where you want to put it, okay, click on register report. Okay, then it clears all this out and it asks you what you're going to register. You get to name it, right? So I'm going to say new DCS by department percent, right? This is a penetration report. It's in the custom directory. If I wanted to try to register it in the SF directory, I can do that. Okay, but what I need to do is I need to get that RPT, right? So the RPT is in the custom directory. This, come on now. This one, right. All right, where'd it go? All right, there we go. Okay, so we can take that copy out of the custom directory, and if I register it into the SF, it's going to put a copy in the SF directory. Okay, but the agony of going through and doing the registration, every place that there is a lookup in this type field, right, you have to go tell the system what database field to pull, right? So if any of you have been through this with any of your training people, right, usually you would zone out, right, while we're doing this, but people do learn, right, how to do this. And it is, you know, if you're going to make copies of your own reports, this is what you need to be able to do, right? And you can see I'm only affecting the ones that say lookup. Sometimes it's not real obvious what field I'm supposed to be looking up, okay? But if you have a report that is that you're cloning, right, you want to look at this table that I'm just looking at right here on the report that you're cloning so you know what fields to fill in where. Names, okay, names, kits. So by the time you do this, you know, by the time you're practiced at this, you know how far you need to get into the label before it pulls the right thing off your list, right? So here, I know I have to go all the way to store C, right? Here, I know that I can just type DCS. I don't need to get to the codes. Here, I have to go all the way to codes, right? Then I've got inventory UDF3, right? And then into UDF4. There was a shortcut there. I'll explain in a minute. For those of you who have seen this before, right? You might know our shortcut trick. But when we get down to where it really makes a difference, I'll show you. Right. Okay. Class. Come on. Here we go. All right. Subclass. All right. So now the let me finish. I don't need those. Okay. So the trick that I was talking about is when you have, these are inventory UDFs, and there's a string of them, right? So do you have to type inventory UDF 5, inventory UDF 6? No, you don't, right? So what you do with this particular case is you get enough of it so you can see on the pull down, right, where you're going, arrow down to the one you want. Okay, now the next one, UDF 6, right, if I type an X, there is no X in the list, so it'll go to the field that's next, okay, or the field that it just put in. So you can just down arrow and pick 6 off the list. So you can go through a list like this in relatively short order, as long as you're reasonably coordinated and you don't get off kilter, like I just did. Okay, X. This is 10. This is 11. Okay, and this is 12. Okay, this is 13. Okay, this is 14. All right. All right, so that's everything, right? If you forget one of these lookups, right, it's going to yell at you when you try to save it. When you save it, okay, it's going to be, it's going to register this in the database, then it's going to be ready for you to use. Okay, report registered successfully. That's all we're doing today. Thank you very much. Right, and so now I've got my new report in my SF directory, right, and I can run it. Now, before I clicked on yes, I wanted to register, and I didn't really want to do that. Okay, so here's my new report. Now, we haven't talked about setting default filters, so we're going to do that here, right, so that you can see how that's done, because that's going to segue us into creating a group of reports that we can run automatically, which is one of the last things that we talk about here. Okay, so when you have a report, right, and you click on the Run button, it asks you how you want to filter it. Okay. If you're making the same changes every time, okay, you can default those, right, for this run. So let's say for this report, I'm going to click down on the filters down here on the left at the bottom. All right, and I'm going to go to criteria over here on the right. All right, and so these are all the filter criteria that we can use. Typically, right, in here, if you're going to set up default parameters, most of the time it's the date, right? So you want to set this as a dynamic date, like yesterday, today, months and months ago, right? So because I don't have too much data in here, I'm going to say 24 months starting 24 months ago, right? So theoretically, right, this, whenever you run it, it's going to run 24 months starting with the last full month, right? So it's not going to include March today. Okay. And so you can set any of these, right? So if you say, I want to exclude certain departments, right, you can set that in the filter. If you want to include or exclude certain vendors, or, you know, in this, you could probably even exclude like non-inventory items if you wanted to. So there's a lot of filtering that you can do in here, but when you save it, every time you run this report, right, so now if I go back up to the reports section and go to my SF directory and I go here, right, when I say run, it knows what date range to run. Now, if you're running this on demand, you can change that. Not a big deal. Okay. But if I wanted to run this now that I've got this set up, I can put this in a file on a timer, right, and say on the first of the month, run this report. It's going to show me like the last 2 years of stuff, right? And this is what it would look like. So I make sure it runs before we get crazy into the whole batch file thing, right? So this runs. This is my yeah, my percent to total is a little wackadoodle on this report. The reason that I'm looking at the percent to totals, I forgot to point that out in the Crystal report, right? That this is supposed to show the penetration of this DCS either to the grand total, right, or to the department. And because I took the vendor out, it was probably you know, not doing exactly what I need. So let me look at that really quick and see. Right, so the percent to total is a form of summary, right? So this field right here is my summary percentage of something, right? So I'm going to try to edit that, right? So if I right click on it, I can go to edit summary, and it is a percentage of extended price group 2. So let's make that this. Okay, and then let's see what this is. Edit summary, percent of grand total. That's going to change the way that looks. Let me just, yeah, okay. So let's run this again. Okay. All right, here we go. Oh, maybe not. All right, what's going on here? Did I do the right one? Sales summary, file, save, file. I'm saving it in the custom directory. So I registered this in the SF directory. And instead of saving it into the SF directory, I saved it into the custom directory. Right. So up here, save it to the SF directory. Right. There's the copy that I'm actually running in here in my SF directory. All right. So now when I run this, right, it should tell me that it's changed. Right. That was my first clue that I didn't get it. Right. So it's been changed. I've integrated the database, and here's my percent to total. Right. So I've told this percent to total that each line is a percent to the grand total. You have your choice. It could be a percent to the next subtotal up. It could be a percent to the total total. And I've chosen to do the total total because this is a relatively simple report. Right. And so that is a statistic, right, that you can use. It's a built-in feature of Crystal reports. It's very handy. right? So this, you can use this percent of total. Some people call it penetration, right? So you can put penetration on, you know, almost any line item slash summary, okay? And it's a very handy statistic. Okay, so we've got this report. We have a default filter, right? So that's everything we need in order to make this part of an automated scenario. Okay, so I'm going to minimize all this, right? So I have a couple of batch files, right, that I already created. I'm just going to show you what they are and how they work. Okay, we can test them, and I can show you what actually happens with the output if you want to try to use these batch files. You know, you might find them in your install directory on your R drive under V9 reports. If you don't find them, shoot us an email, right? Because we can make these available for you. You're not going to kill anything by using them, so we can give them to you, and you can try to tinker with them yourself. Or if you need help, you can get a tech or trainer to help you with it. Okay, but essentially what we have is a batch file, Windows batch file. Okay, and so these two right here are the ones that we're looking at. This reportsdaily.bat is a file that I've created, and I've got it right here, right? And so what you're seeing here is, first thing it does is, if anybody's sitting in reports, it's going to kill it. Okay, so if you're running this in the middle of the night, it doesn't get stuck because somebody forgot and left their reports open. So it kills the executable for reports, and then it runs this command, okay, which is the Retail Pro reports executable, logs in with a Retail Pro user and password, okay, and if you're doing this yourself, you probably want to use a password other than sysadmin, just in case you change the sysadmin, because if you change the sysadmin password and you don't change it in here, then your reports will stop running. Okay, so if you need help with that, let us know. So this is Retail Pro username, password. This RPT, this is the name of the report. Actually, it's the title of the report, right? So when I was in Reports Viewer here, right, if I wanted to make this report an automated report, okay, the easiest thing to do is to click the Edit button here, copy this with Windows Control-C, copy. Okay, drop it right in here, right where the title is, in between the quotes. By the way, stay away from double quotes in your titles of reports, right? Because if you had a double quote in here, it's likely that your this batch file would not understand it. Okay, so this is the title of the report. This is the folder that we find it in, right? And so since we registered this one in SF, I have to change that. Okay, and what it's going to do, right, is it's going to output. PGS means output it as Excel text. Okay, this can be PDF, right? So those are the two most common things. We're going to output it as Excel or output it as PDF. Okay, and then this, the rest of this right here is, where am I going to put it, right? So when we run this, right, we're going to run the executable. We're going to log in. We're going to go find this report in the custom or in the SF directory. We're going to output it as text, and we're going to put it right there. Okay, so this is the directory. Right, so I have something in here that was from my previous run. I'm just going to delete that here and get it out of the way. Right, so this is my V9 reports folder. So sometimes people will have V9 reports daily folder, right, and they'll dump all their daily reports in there. All that, you know, any of that scenario will work. The /S on there is for silent. Okay, so now that I have this changed over, right, you can run this from a desktop icon. Okay, you can run this. We can add this to your Retail Pro menu, right? Or we can put it in the Windows Task Scheduler, so it runs automatically. So we have a lot of people here who like to have an on-hand report, either at the DCS level, the vendor, whatever level, right? And you know, they are used to, I have to come in I have to make sure I'm there on the 31st or the morning of the 1st to run this report, because the on hand is perpetual, and the minute somebody sells something or receives something, then I don't know what my on hand was at the end of the period, month, or whatever. Right, so typically that's the first thing if you need that report that we automate, so we can tell the task scheduler at 4 o'clock in the morning on the 1st, right, run this report, okay, and let me just, I'm just going to run it here manually like this. You wouldn't see this if it's running automatically, okay, but it's going to run the report, right, and then it's going to put it down in here, right, it'll just magically pop up as soon as it's done. Okay, so it killed, no, it didn't kill it. What's going on here? Aha, okay, so it didn't like my invalid report name. Oh, you know what? I bet it doesn't like that percent sign, because that's a wild card. Okay, let's try this. I'll save. All right. So what I need to do, okay, is change that name. So that's why, you know, some of these things that that you wouldn't necessarily have to be careful with using symbols in your report names. If you're going to automate them, then some of those things are a factor. And we can help you with that if you need to have a list. Okay, but let's do this. I'm going to edit this, take this off. I don't think caps matter, but I'm not taking the chance. Save, yes. Okay, minimize, report saved. Okay, all right, exit. I'm just going to go ahead and exit here because it's going to kill me anyway. All right, so I'll run as administrator too, just to make sure. All right, so it's definitely running now. We think, yes, definitely running now. Okay, so here's our report, right? Outputs it in Excel, plugs it down in this directory. This stuff on the front is a timestamp, right? So if you run this every day, it won't trample a previous one, right? You can so you can put a PDF here, you can put an Excel here, and I'm going to just open this up in Excel real quick because I didn't export anything to Excel yet to show you what that looks like, right? This is a text only, right? It's usually the most usable form, right? So here's your report in text only, right? And if you can open those up because it imports with a standard 8 width field, right? That's generally not acceptable. Anyway, so that's exporting to Excel. You can do that directly from Retail Pro. You can run these batch files, output them as Excel, and then do with them whatever you need to do. We do have people who set, after the reports are run, set it up to auto email to a specified list of people. We don't cover that in this webinar, but if you're interested in doing that, you can shoot us an email. Okay, so someone's asking the question. Asking if they can run the reports viewer from any PC on your network, as long as the PC can see the database. And that's limited, yes, right? So typically, right, if you're networked, right? So if you're running over a network share, right? So then you can run the executable from the network share and everything's fine. Okay, if you have a local copy of the reports executable, there's other things that you need besides just the executable. You might need the report network structure, right? Or you might need the reports, the Retail Pro reports just installed on that computer. You do not have to have Retail Pro installed on the computer in order to use the reports, but you might need the reports part of Retail Pro installed on this computer. The other point with reports is running reports does not take up a seat, right? So in case if you have 4 or 5 workstations, and some of them run Retail Pro and some don't, right? but you only have like 3 seats, which means only 3 people in Retail Pro at a time. If you run reports, that does not take up a seat, right? So you could run a report either from one of your Retail Pro workstations or from a computer that had just the reports installed on it but can see the database, and it doesn't take up a seat. So you could have 6 people in reports and not take up any seats. Okay, so this is our output file, right? You can Excel or PDF, right? If you're going to print these, you want to PDF them, and currently there is not a way to automatically send them to the printer when they run over, on a scheduled basis, right? They will sit here in a folder waiting for you to do something with them. Okay, and if you want to talk about auto emailing, send us an email message, and we'll get somebody set up to talk to you about it, tell you how it works, and get it set up for you if you wish. Okie doke. All right, let me check my agenda here really quick. I run over most of the stuff here. I think I've done, most of the cook's tour here. We're only supposed to go an hour, but I always overrun. I always get talked on the subject and get going crazy. All right, so anyway, that's what we generally cover in this. I know some of you that were registered for this are people that I talk to all the time. Hopefully this served as just a refresher, right, for what's possible and what's not possible. If you are interested in maybe downloading the trial for Crystal, right, and kicking the tires yourself, and you want assistance, let us know, right? We can schedule a little bit of time with the trainer. I will let you know that downloading the Crystal trial even, right, is, takes a little while, right? So try to do it yourself when you don't have a trainer or a tech over your shoulder, because it does take 15-20 minutes, I think, last time I tried it. Okay. But if you have struggles, let us know. We'll try to get you pointed in the right direction so that you can try things yourself. Right. These webinars, we give this webinar like 2 or 3 times a year. Different trainers have different perspectives. I know my compatriot Jeff goes a little deeper in certain areas, so feel free when you get this email that links you back to our YouTube channel, browse through the other reports, webinars that are posted out there, especially if it's a different voice than mine. If it's Jeff's, he will give you a little bit different perspective on reports, and it might be worth getting those perspectives as well. All right, so thanks for your attention. Anybody who signed in, right, is going to automatically get an email. Actually, if you just signed up and you didn't sign in, you're still going to get an email with a link back to this. I hope it was beneficial for you, and we'll see you with the next webinar. Thanks very much.